Welcome. Welcome, everybody. I'm Rich Lyons, Dean here at Berkeley-Haas, and this is our final Dean's Speaker Series session here for our semester. So thank you for being here. It is a pleasure for me to introduce to you one of our alums, and someone who has been an inspiration to me and really an important source of advice and counsel for me, and that is, as you know, Scott Galloway. He has served on our board here at the Haas School. He has been close to the school for a long time, and in so many different ways. I just couldn't put this in a personal enough way, because when I think of the things that he has done for all of us and for the school, it is really quite remarkable, and on many different fronts. So let me say a little bit more about him. I won't be able to do it justice, but you're here to listen to him and not to me. But when we talk about question the status quo, for example, this is a quintessential questioner of the status quo. This is somebody who makes sure that we're being real and that we're being honest with ourselves. He will, I'm sure, challenge us with a number of great ideas here today. That's part of why he's here, of course. Let me say also that, he self-describes as a proud product, quote, of the generosity and vision of the University of California Regents. This is somebody who grew up educationally in California and is deeply thankful for that. He attended UCLA as an undergraduate on a Pell Grant scholarship. He graduated with a degree in economics and went on to work at Morgan Stanley as an investment banker. He soon realized that investment banking was not for him. Quote, I hated it and was terrible at it, end quote. He decided to pursue his MBA at Berkeley-Haas. It was here that Scott met his marketing professor, David Ocker, one of the great marketing professors and branding minds in the world. Along with his MBA classmate, Ian Chaplin, Scott founded the successful Profit Brand Strategy. That company was 1992, and that was based on some of Ocker's branding principles and some of what Scott and Ian learned here at Haas. In 1998, he founded an e-commerce gifts company. That was Red Envelope. That Red Envelope went public in 2003. Calling himself an entrepreneur turned academic, it was at this point that Scott decided to pursue a lifelong desire to teach. And he joined the faculty at NYU's Stern School of Business, teaching brand strategy and digital marketing. 2012, he was named one of the 50 best business school professors in the world by Poets Quants. His latest venture, a member-based digital research firm, L2, that focuses on the luxury brand market. Founded in 2010, already they've got 30 of the world's 100 largest brands in their client base. They use extensive data across a number of different dimensions of what brand strength means in luxury and other industries. And they provide their member brands with comparative data to help them really sharply differentiate in an obviously super competitive market, the luxury markets. I'm certain we'll be hearing a lot more from Scott and also of L2 about that in the future. Let me also close here in the comments where I started. Really, this is, I mentioned quintessential questioner of the status quo. I'd like to link him also to that principle of ours beyond yourself. He's just completely committed to the University of California, to this Berkeley, to this Haas School. Please join me in welcoming Scott Galloway. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks. Thank you, Rick. Thanks, boss. Thanks so much. This is such an emotional experience for me. I remember I was the student speaker at Strawberry, or the Greek Theater, Strawberry, whatever it was, and I remember my mom, who's no longer with us, waving. She was just so proud. Anyway, I'm crying before I start. So I work for a company called L2, and we are a data-driven company. We track 1,850 data points across the 2,000 largest brands globally, and we like to think that we're train spotters and we can see patterns. And thinking a lot about the companies that disrupt traditional industries, and if you were to play the Final Four over and over in business, it always comes down to the same four teams, is what I find. It's either Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google in almost any Final Four and any tournament around these categories and these industries. And there's some really wonderful, inspiring things about that, and I also think there's some dangerous things about that. And one of the wonderful things about being an academic, and one of the great things about America and this notion of tenure and academic institutions, is that you're given license to pursue the truth regardless of who it offends, which fits my personality well. So the idea of being an academic and also getting a chance to go out and collect data and then talk about business is really an intoxicating opportunity. So I'm going to take you through today some thoughts around what I call the Gang of Four: Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Google, and then reminisce for just a few minutes about Berkeley and some of the stuff I've been doing since graduating, and then if we have some time, open it up for questions. So with that, I'm going to go fairly crisply here. I'm going to save the ad on L2. So 1,850 data points across 4 dimensions: site, digital marketing, social, and mobile. And we do it across a ton of brands. And we'll go out and then make big predictions. And like Eisenhower said, plans are useless, but planning is invaluable. I think predictions are a lot of fun, even if you get them wrong. And under the auspices of getting stuff wrong, I spoke at a conference last year in Germany where I predicted that Amazon would decline in value, that the world is moving towards multi-channel retail. Consumers want multiple touch points. No consumer lives in isolation of any one medium. So we would have finally an era where Amazon declined in value. And literally the moment I said that, it got a ton of play. It got over 1 million views on YouTube, which for a professor is a lot. And if you want to be invited to every retail boardroom in America, just be critical of Amazon, right? Because everyone is just so ready to hate Amazon. And so I made this bold prediction when the stock was at 300 and laid out my case that Amazon was going to decline in value. And literally the moment I said it, this is what happened to the stock price. So the first big data observation is we get it wrong all the time. Let's talk about these companies. $1.3 trillion combined market cap in 2015. Now they're up to about 1.8 trillion or 1.6 trillion. So basically the GDP of Canada is what these 4 companies represent. And to talk about the outsized value creation they have, there's about 350,000 people working for all 4 of these firms. So that's the equivalent of the GDP of Canada being produced by the number of people who live in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So we have never seen this smaller group of people create so much economic value in the history of modern business. And if you were to look at the GDP of nations, it largely correlates to their influence globally. And as you can see now, these companies have more influence than many nations. If we even take it further than that and go with the analogy, Amazon's market cap is equivalent to the GDP of Romania, Serbia, and Iceland. Keep going. Apple, you get to add in Ireland and Finland. Let's talk about Facebook. We add the Czech Republic and Belarus. And then if we add Google, we pick up Denmark, the Ukraine, and Bulgaria. And if we add in, try to get closer to this, if we add in Alibaba, we end up with a combined market cap that's equal to the GDP of Russia. So, and I would argue that other than having nuclear weapons, these companies have more influence on society than Northern, Eastern Europe, and in many instances, Russia. And this is both a good and a bad thing. So let's talk about Google. Google's market cap, and this is an infographic scaled to size, is greater than a ton of ad-supported media companies. I mean, you have some of the most iconic media companies that have taken generations to build, and they still don't add up to Google. Amazon, if you don't include Walmart, it's tough to find as many retailers who add up to the market cap of Amazon. Amazon in November and December of last year were responsible for 43% of all online sales. The next 10 were responsible for 25. So think of an industry where the number one leader, the number one player is doing 43%, and the next 10 combined are doing 25%. The same is largely true in Europe, very concentrated towards Amazon. Amazon's actually growing faster in Europe than it is in North America. Now let's talk about Apple. This is apples to oranges, if you will, because on the left-hand side we have their growth, what they added to their top line, and then on the right side we have total revenues. So Apple added last year to their top line Louis Vuitton, Coach, Prada, Hermes, Michael Kors, Richemont, and the Kering Group. That's what they added last year, and everyone's worried and talking about how Apple is slowing down. Apple added $52 billion to their top-line revenue last year. So in sum, it's Jeff's, Larry's, Tim's, and Mark's world. We just shop, search, text, and post in it. Now, typically at conferences or gatherings like this, we talk about winners, and we like to think that the rising tide is lifting all boats, but in a 1.8% global GDP growth economy, if a company is growing faster than 2%, there's someone on the losing end of that. And people don't like to talk about the losers because they're ultimately going to offend somebody, and they're worried about losing clients or losing opportunities. But it's just as interesting, and quite frankly, it's probably a greater ROI to talk about the losers because it's an underinvested theory. It's an underinvested explored part of our economy is who's getting hurt by the incredible growth here. I love television. I think this is a golden age of TV, and I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, and I like analogies to Game of Thrones, so I call this Game of Phones, but effectively these companies are like Khaleesi's dragons, and that when they're small, you can feed them goats and rats and they're fine. But when you're Apple and you have to grow your revenue 52 billion, and you're Amazon and you have to grow your revenue 16 billion every year, you have to start feeding them cities, right? They get really big. This is Westeros for those of you who don't know Game of Thrones. So the question isn't whether they're going to get into self-driving cars, grocery, media, television. It's not if, it's when. They have no choice. These companies have no choice but to get into these industries because they're so dominant in their current sectors that to maintain their incredible expectations from the marketplace, they have to get into these large, high-margin businesses. So let's talk about Facebook and Google against the media industry, or think of them in the media context. Grew 40% and 12% respectively for an average growth rate of 26%. This is the average growth rate, which is basically flat, of some other amazing media companies. As you can see, some iconic brands are basically just struggling to hold on. Why? Kids come to my class and they want to talk about careers, and I have one graph, and it's basically sex appeal versus return. Any industry that doesn't sound sexy is probably good return, and if it sounds like you want to go to work for Vogue, you want to open a nightclub, be a restaurateur, great, but make sure there's a lot of psychic income because the ROI on your human and your financial capital is going to be really low. These iconic brands are having a terribly tough time. Why? Because it's great to be in digital marketing as long as you work for Facebook or Google. This is a very difficult industry because you have two companies sucking the oxygen out of the room for everybody else. In 2010, you had the U.S. magazine industry did 16 billion. Facebook was doing 2 billion. Just 5 years later, Facebook will do 16 billion, and the entire U.S. magazine industry is now 11 billion. Think about that. Facebook is bigger than the entire U.S. magazine industry. If you look at the UK, Google is about to become a bigger business in the UK than the entire print magazine business there, to give you a sense for their scale. Now, what is the industry that advertising built, that ad-supported media built? This has all kinds of ramifications across the entire ecosystem. The industry that print and broadcast media built was CPG. P&G is the house that TV advertising. Clorox is the house that TV and great rigorous advertising skill set built. So what happens when these swords get duller and duller, when ad-supported media is no longer an effective tool? What you have is that 90 of the 100 largest CPG brands in America lost share last year, and 2/3 of them declined in revenue. The death in the advertising industrial complex is not only hurting these big agencies and these big media companies, it's rippling back to industries that were built on advertising like CPG. They're struggling as well. So the CEO of L'Oreal says the brands that grew the most in 2014 were low advertising intensive brands like Urban Decay, Kiehl's, etc. NYX has no media, Kiehl's has no media, Urban Decay has media. The same from the CEO of Estee Lauder, a company that has a larger market cap now than WPP, the largest communications firm in the world. The fastest growing brands such as MAC or Joe Malone or La Mer or Bobbi Brown are not advertised in the traditional way. Advertising has become the tax that poor people pay. If you are technically literate or wealthy, you are increasingly given the ability to opt out of advertising. We have become numb to how bad advertising is, and we are getting the opportunities to opt out. How many of you watch Modern Family off of iTunes when you could get it on demand from ABC News or ABC.com, but you'd rather pay the $1.99 than endure the advertising, right? Business Insider made $35 million last year and had 70 million people go to their site, which means they're getting just 50 cents from us so they can reload the page with all that video and all that ad crap they're constantly inundating it with. Think about TV advertising and think about how ridiculously bad the advertising is in terms of its relevance to you. Chances are you do not have restless leg syndrome. Chances are you do not drink light beer, and you're not in the market for a Hyundai. Advertising does not work. 80 to 90% of the advertising industrial complex does not work. And so wealthy people are using their DVRs and over-the-top. Look what's growing in media. It's all non-ad supported. It's HBO. It's Netflix. Why? Because just as we became, in this country, numb to the idea of mass shootings and woke up and realized, this is awful, we don't need this, we become numb to how bad advertising is, and the public's waking up and going, I don't need this. I don't need advertising in my life, and they are opting out of the system. Do not go to work in an industry that is either built or dependent upon ad-supported media if the sun has passed midday on these industries and these firms. Any ad agency execs with us? They're not just befuddled prey waiting around. They're trying to make this transition to the great digital future. My favorite example of this is we scrape data from LinkedIn. These are some great media companies. Mindshare, MEC, if you're looking to meet with their chief digital officer for lunch and he or she stands you up, no problem. There's 5 others. These companies have 6 chief digital officers. I love that. Just call everyone a chief digital officer. Let's look at the ad tech ecosystem. This is a Lumascape. All of these companies are great, well-funded ad tech companies that should have a great future. But let's really look at what's happening in this great high-growth industry. There's Google and there's Facebook, whose stocks are up 40 and 42% respectively over the course of the last year. Here are all the other publicly traded ad tech companies. As you can see, there's a big difference. There's Facebook and there's Google, and then there's everybody else. And everybody else is dying. And we like to think this is a robust, great ecosystem with tons of opportunity. Again, digital marketing is a great business as long as you're working at Facebook or Google. Everybody else is waiting around hoping to be acquired by Facebook or Google or to go out of business. We've entered into this gestalt in the venture capital community and the ecosystem of entrepreneurship, which I call get rich or die trying. When I got out of business school here, there was a notion, build a great company, sell for a good amount, good return to stakeholders. Now it's be a unicorn or die. Right? Your venture capitalists have to get 1 or 2 unicorns to pay for their return on their portfolio. So singles and doubles just don't work. So while we had some of the biggest exits in history, there's fewer and fewer of them. And it's becoming a winner-take-all economy. And it's dangerous because if you believe the media, you would think that there are 400,000 people working at Uber. There's only 4,000. There's 1.1 million partner drivers who don't share in the equity upside and average $7.75 per hour. But the majority of the spoils of a company valued at $60 billion are being split by 4,000 people. That's great if you own real estate in San Francisco. It's great if you own the Ferrari dealership in Portola Valley. It is bad for the fabric of America to have so much wealth concentration, so much wealth creation with a small group of people. The heroes and the innovators of yesteryear, Unilever, $150 billion market cap, 150,000 middle-class households spit into the world globally. Intel, more efficient, only 100,000 people, $160 billion market cap. Facebook, $300 billion market cap, 12,000 employees. We have moved into an economy where the perception is we're creating a ton of great jobs, when the reality is we're creating a small number of ridiculously high-paying jobs, and everybody else is fighting over the scraps. And it is a dangerous place that we are headed. Everybody's cool. You should see when I give this speech on the West Coast. They're like, wait, what, you're a socialist now? So I feel like I'm home. What is the future of media? We still love brands. We still need to understand and learn about stuff. The future is mobile advertising, a mobile phone, ads and search ads on a mobile device. There are 2 companies that control 51% of global mobile ad revenues, and every day they control more. Think about this. The most exciting, fastest growth part of the entire media ecosystem is controlled now by two companies. Let's talk about Amazon and Apple in the context of retail. So they combined grew $65 billion in revenue. As we mentioned, Apple was at 51, Apple was at 14.5. You can't find enough retailers to add up to that much growth. They just don't exist. Nike, an amazing company. Its best year in history, 2015. Its stock up 40%. They grew their revenues $2.8 billion. Apple grew their revenues 51. You can't find enough companies. The only way you can find enough companies to add to the global growth of these two retailers, if you will, is to add in companies like Toyota, Daimler Chrysler, BMW. You can add up the most iconic, biggest companies in the world, and you have to keep going until you finally add up to the revenue growth of Amazon and Apple. Amazon was responsible for 24% of all retail growth in America last year and 51% of all e-commerce growth. Think about what an amazing ecosystem and how much opportunity there is in e-commerce. The majority of the growth in this amazing growth sector came from one player. 51% of growth in the US online came from Amazon last year. Amazon has redefined business. And the thing that's so wonderful, I think so amazing about Game of Thrones, back to television, is Game of Thrones redefined our relationship with leading characters and protagonists. And that is, we've had this agreement with media companies that they'll build up someone we become emotionally involved with and buy into, usually a dude, usually a good-looking dude who has some scary kind of spy skills, right? And he always gets out of these dangerous situations no matter what. So there's a new James Bond film, or there's a Series 3, right? Game of Thrones has redefined the relationship in that they build up these protagonists, both men and women, and we really buy into these people, and then what do? They kill them. And it's absolutely game-changing. And Amazon has had this Game of Thrones game-changing. Imagine if Goldfinger had let the laser kept going with James Bond, right? Amazon has redefined the relationship between shareholders and a company. And what they've said is we're going to replace profits with vision and growth. So here are the profits of Amazon, and people say Amazon can't be profitable. Of course they can. They don't want to be. They perfectly manage their business to break even because they have recognized that profits are to investors what heroin is to an addict, in that he or she gets very used to profits and really likes profits. And then if you take the profits away, the investor gets very upset and very irritable. So Amazon never got the marketplace addicted to this heroin of profits. This is Amazon's profits versus Walmart's. Do you think this is by accident, the way that Amazon manages its profitability? You couldn't do that accidentally. They perfectly manage to break even. We're a great company, we're not losing money, but no heroin for you, right? Look at Walmart, massively profitable. Walmart has the correct response last year and says, we have to respond to Amazon. We're going to make a $2.5 billion increase in CapEx around technology. That is absolutely the right move, absolutely the correct response. And within 20 minutes of announcing that, they shed the value of Macy's. Their stock gets hammered 14% because, yeah, that's all fine and good, but don't take away my heroin. So every company in the retail space is in a box because the only way they can compete with Amazon is to make these unparalleled, gargantuan investments to go toe-to-toe with Amazon. But the marketplace has said, no, you need to show a profit, whereas Amazon can just break even. It's the equivalent of having a business school that every year gets 500 million and everyone else gets 20 to 50 million. At some point, the guy or gal getting the 500 million is just going to build a better organization. That is the advantage Amazon has. It's not operations, it's not brand, it's storytelling from Jeff Bezos that has created the cheapest source of capital in modern business history so they can do more stuff, innovate more, take more chances, and fail more, because it doesn't matter, because they have that much more capital. Mickey Drexler, the CEOs of The Gap, and J. Crew summarized it perfectly. How do you compete with a giant that doesn't want to make money? That's what the world is competing with in retail against Amazon. What is the product that defines our age? I think most of us would agree that's the smartphone. One player controls 92% of profits globally from the product that defines our future, and that is Apple. They get 92% of global profits from the smartphone industry. Samsung gets 15. You might say, well, that doesn't make any sense. It does, because everybody else fights over 7% of the losses. Apple, PCs are going down, right? Don't tell Apple that. They sold more PCs last year than the year before. The Apple Watch is a big failure, right? Let's talk about Apple's failure. The media treats Apple in a bifurcated standpoint. It's either going to change the world or it's a failure. Yeah, a product that just says, you never see a headline that just says meh or okay, right? Let's talk about their failure. Apple comes into the market and overnight takes the entire smartwatch market away from Samsung the day they announced it. Samsung used to control 76% of smartwatches. It went down to 8%, and Apple took 74% in 60 days. They literally came in and said, thank you, we'll take that market. There are no more smartwatches shipped than watches shipped out of Switzerland. The smartwatch industry is now bigger on a unit level than the entire Swiss watch industry, and Apple is responsible for 63% of it. Let's look at the stock prices. Here is Apple with its failure. It's up 67% in the last 3 years. Notice when they launched the Apple Watch. Now look at the stock prices of every other wearables and watch company that's publicly traded, and pay specific attention to try and draw a regression line since the release of the Apple Watch. There's Swatch, there's Richemont, there's Fitbit, there's GoPro, and there's Fossil. Do these companies, would they agree that the Apple Watch is a failure? The Apple Watch has literally come in and decimated a multi-billion-dollar industry with about $100 billion in market cap and cut it by a third based on Apple's failure. Fitbit announces they're going to compete head-on with Apple. Their stock goes down 13% the moment the release goes out, saying they're competing with the Apple Watch. Let's talk a little bit about migration. In a digital age, a team of the best players wins. This is the number of people. You can do this on LinkedIn now. You can scrape LinkedIn and see where people are migrating, from what firm to what firm. This is the number of people who've gone from Google, Facebook, and Amazon to these amazing firms. From these amazing firms to Google, Facebook, Amazon. So P&G has lost 360 people to Amazon. Unilever has lost 194 people to Google. You might say, okay, Scott, that's not a big deal. People trade players all the time. They go back, they go forth. But what's the next question, right? How many people have gone from Google, Amazon, or Facebook to these amazing companies? So watch closely. This is the reverse migration over the same time period. In sum, if you want to find the brightest and best at P&G, Unilever, or L'Oreal, it's easy. Just go to Google. The economy is literally reshaping. Now, what about within the gang of four, right? What about among the four firms? They trade players, and they're largely, the one firm that has probably got the best retention right now is Facebook. And this is probably a forward-looking indicator of value. Who's holding on to people, who's losing them. The firm that's starting to suck the most people out of these four companies, is Uber. 1 out of 4 people who work at Uber came from one of these four companies. What company is effectively acting as a giant HR and recruiting vehicle for the entire industry? Brings them on, pays them well, trains them, and then they leave? Yahoo. I got in a lot of hot water by saying that Marissa Mayer was the most overpaid CEO in the history of technology. I'm checking that statement. She's the most underpaid recruiter in the world of technology. What's the path to $1 trillion? How do each of these companies get to $1 trillion? For Facebook, it's monetization. Right now, they have some unbelievable assets, but they get 95% of their revenue from one platform, Facebook. What if they monetize Instagram, Messenger, and WhatsApp? Instagram, easily the best acquisition in tech in the last 10 years. They stole it for $1 billion. Remember all the grief that Zuckerberg got for buying that thing with 19 people? It's worth somewhere between 20 and 40 billion easily right now. Instagram is the most powerful social media network in the world. If you look at the population, times the levels of engagement. It's already by far the most powerful platform in the world. WhatsApp has grown, doubled its users. There's a proxy for monetization of messaging with WeChat out of China that's now getting $5 per user. Facebook's spending 40 cents on every dollar in R&D. We've never seen that in the history of business for a company doing more than 10 billion in revenues. Apple and IBM spend between 5 and 10% on R&D. So as a result, Facebook is the most innovative, generative new product company in the history of business. They're putting out stuff every 2 to 4 weeks. So the case for $1 trillion, they have 1 billion daily active users, $16 per user, $16 billion in revenue, $300 billion market cap. What if they monetize the rest? They got to 2 billion daily active users and got to $50 per user. That's the same growth rate. If they just continue the same growth rate for the next 3 years, that's 100 billion in revenue. I think that's a $1 trillion market cap. I think Amazon gets there with acquisition. Jeff Bezos denied they were opening stores, or the rumor that they're opening hundreds of stores. I do think that's not true. I think they're going to open thousands of stores. Stores still matter. There's a rumor that stores are dead. It's not that stores are dead, it's the middle class are dying. Show me a store in a wealthy neighborhood, I'll show you a store that's just fine. Show me a store in a middle class or a lower income neighborhood, and I'll show you a business like every other business is suffering. Bricks have never been stronger as long as you own the right bricks. General Growth Properties and Simon Properties are the 2 largest mall operators in the US. They largely concentrate on wealthy neighborhoods. Their stocks have hit all-time highs. Multi-channel is the future. Amazon will absolutely have thousands of stores within the next decade. How do they get there? My favorites are they're going to acquire Macy's or Carrefour. They could acquire these companies, pay a 50% premium on their stocks, and take about a 14% dilution to their current equity, and they'd end up with a company that doesn't have 68 warehouses but has thousands, because Macy's and Carrefour have basically turned their stores into warehouses. So what do we end up with? We end up with a company that does $300 billion in revenue, is the perfect multi-channel player, 50% from e-commerce, 50% from stores, growing at 12%. I think that's a $1 trillion market cap company. Do not go to work or invest in overnight delivery right now. FedEx, DHL, or UPS. These are companies that have stuck their chin up, raised their prices 84% in the last 10 years with no underlying innovation, which is the definition of being susceptible to disruption. And here comes Amazon, leasing 757s, buying tractor trailers. They are going to be in the overnight business. You're going to see $120 billion in the total market cap of DHL, UPS, and FedEx get cut in half, and Amazon's going to be happy to pick all of it up. You trust Amazon more. You'd rather have Amazon deliver your stuff, and then Amazon will start leasing that capacity the same way they deliver storage and computing power out to other players. They'll start delivering and renting last mile services to other players and start going after those 3. Google, I think, is extension. Greatest concentration of IQ in history is at Google. There's really 2 properties that make money, so they're trying a bunch of other stuff. They're obviously incredibly smart people. We talked about disruption. How do you know if you're ripe for disruption? You just look at your price increases relative to inflation. And if the price increases are much greater than inflation, you're ripe for disruption if there hasn't been an underlying increase in innovation. So cable, right? Our cable bill has doubled. The underlying innovation, DVR is a little bit better, your screen's more megapixels, but it really hasn't been much innovation. So in steps all these incredible players who say, we can't resist the $60 billion high margin chum in the water that is TV advertising. So you have these incredibly savvy players saying, this is too good to resist, and they come in and they're disrupting the TV ad market. There is another, though. There's a market that's more ripe for disruption, that it's raised its prices even faster than TV, with not a lot of underlying increase in innovation. Any guesses? Absolutely. $1.6 trillion in the US, $7 trillion globally. Education is literally sticking its chin out.
That's all the time we have. Thank you very much for coming.
Except for here, of course. So, I teach brand strategy on Monday nights, which is basically David Ocker's class that I took here with updated case studies. I have 325 kids enrolled in my class. That's $1.9 million. They pay $6,000 for me for 12 nights in a room with a projector like this. That's $163,000 a night. I remind myself of that every time I go into class, so I'm tempted not to just phone it in. To give you a sense for how outrageous that is, granted, my agent, NYU, takes a 97% commission, but I'm getting paid, technically, more than these amazing football players get paid per week. I'm paid more for my skills than these guys. You can see this makes no sense. I am paid more than every cast member of the most recent installment of Star Wars, with the exception of Harrison Ford. By the way, for the next one, I think I would be awesome. I'm ready. I am ready, and I will cut my fees. Adele, until her last album, made less than I did when she would tour. I made more money per week than Adele until her most recent album. I typically do an imitation of Adele here, but I'm not going to subject you to this. So Apple. I think Apple's mission is not clear. I think the only thing standing between them and $1 trillion is the lack of a compelling mission. The best brand in the world, what has Rich been focused on the last 10 years? Constantly pounding into anyone who'll listen. These principles, beyond yourself, always a... And you get sick of it, but what you realize is how powerful it is, because if you don't have it, it gets in the way of people investing in you, because they judge you on what have you done for me lately if they don't understand your mission. Facebook connecting the world, I get it. I like it, compelling. They're going to make a lot of money. I'm going to buy their stock. Amazon's world biggest store, I get it, compelling. I'm going to buy their stock. Google organizing the Earth's information, super compelling. They're going to make a lot of money. I'm going to buy their stock. What's Apple's mission? We can feel it. We sort of know it, but can anyone here articulate in 5 words, like these other firms, what Apple's mission is? They haven't been able to. So as a result, it's a what have you done for me lately in the investment community, where if they release a product that doesn't work, they take the stock down 40%. Amazon can release a terrible phone. They ride right through it. Google can fail with Google Glass, but as long as they show progress against being the Earth's biggest store or organizing the Earth's information, we continue to bid their stock up. As a result, Apple trades at a multiple of EBITDA of 7 versus 19, 39, and 41 respectively. All that Apple needs to do is communicate the amazing thing they're doing in a distilled mission to the marketplace, and if they can get their multiple just to 12, boom, they're at $1 trillion. This is literally a lack of vision discount or tax that they pay. What does the future look like? I'm a big naysayer on a lot of technologies people are excited about. Mass customization makes no sense to me. The reason I pay so much money for this stuff is I want someone more talented than me telling me what to wear. I don't want to mass customize anything. That's a niche market. Wearables make no sense to me. Google Glass is not, I got to show this. Google Glass is not a wearable. It's a prophylactic, ensuring you'll never conceive a child as no one will get near you. The other thing that I think is a huge head fake is 3D printing. Aren't we all supposed to have 3D printers by now and never need anything because we'll just make it out of a wax mold? Getting everything we want, great quality, really inexpensively. Guess what? The world already has an amazing 3D printer, and it's called China. What's the next big non-thing? The next big head fake that's going to decimate VCs all over the world is virtual reality. I just don't buy it. I don't think that's what people want to put on their head. I think they're going to get nauseous. This is what you look like when you have this thing on your head. We have learned nothing. Here's the narrative around virtual reality. Right now, the narrative, it's going to change everything. Then it's going to go, it's going to change business. Then it's going to move to, no, well, it's not going to change business. It's going to change entertainment. Then it's going to be, well, maybe it's not going to change entertainment. It will definitely change video games. Then it'll be commercial applications. Then it'll be niche commercial applications. And it will finally end up where all overhyped technologies end up, and that it's going to change porn. What about society? Google is a modern man's God. As societies become more educated, they become more atheist. We still have a need to pray to a higher being that takes information, distills it in a divine way, and then sends us back an answer. Symptoms and treatment of croup. Will my son be all right? You type it into Google, it comes back with an answer. Google is a modern man's God. We can't wrap our heads around these huge problems like how can someone as awesome as me actually die? How does space end? So we need the intervention of a divine being, and the closest thing we have in a modern society to that divine being is in fact Google, and that's why they are so successful. Amazon Marketplace, we hoard stuff. We want more stuff in our lives. It makes us feel safer. Apple is procreation. This is the first slide in my class. There's only 3 things we do in business. We appeal to the rational organ, the brain, transportation, commodities. You do not want to be in this business. The brain's the ultimate competitor. It will starch out all the margin in the business. Then CPG figured out, let's move to a more irrational organ, the heart, and that is choosy moms choose Jif. You love your kid more if you use this peanut butter or wash their clothes in this detergent. And then the margins get really great when you move even further south to talk about procreation. If you haven't done really stupid things with your genitals, you haven't lived. And luxury brands tap into that stupidity, right? This isn't a watch. It's an $11,000 mix of steel, glass, and movements that cost $1,000 that makes me feel more Italian and more masculine. And it's not saying I'm into watches. It's saying to women, if you mate with me, your children have a greater chance of survival than if you mate with someone wearing a Swatch watch. We'd like to think we're more evolved than that. We're not. Estee Lauder, LVMH, and now Apple have tapped into that. Apple sang to our brain with a better computer. Then it went into music, which was emotional, and now it's moved down to the genitals. This is the ultimate signal of wealth and opportunities in terms of procreation. If this says you're smarter, better educated, and have a greater likelihood of a random sexual experience than if you're carrying Android. This is how kids now express themselves. As a result, Rich is dying. It's like, how did we invite this guy? How did we invite this guy? As a result, Apple has 32% operating margins, greater than LVMH. We've never had a company that has had the scale of Toyota with the margins of Ferrari. No company has ever been the low-cost producer in terms of volume with the margins of the premium price product. We've never seen that before in a company, and it's because they have migrated successfully down the torso. Facebook is love. We as a species need to love and to be loved. The number 1 indicator of your longevity, or number 3, is your genetics. We like to think genetics are number 1, they're number 3. They're less important than you would think because we like the security of thinking the die have been cast and no matter how badly I abuse my body, I'll live to 95 because grandma popped it, right? It's not that way at all. Number 2 is lifestyle. In sum, don't be obese and don't smoke, and you screen out 60% of cardiac and cancer diseases. The number 1 indicator of how long you will live is how many people in your life do you love. Specifically, are you a caregiver? It's not how many people that love you. People who have a lot of people that love them report living more rewarding lives, but they don't live any longer. New mothers do not die. If your aging parents move in with you, your life expectancy immediately goes up 3 to 5 years. We have a part of our brain that senses whether we are adding value, and the greatest value add in life is to love others and take care of them. And then a hormone goes out, clears out the bad cholesterol, and you live longer. I believe Facebook is letting us love at scale. I think it's very instinctive. Our ability to make connections with people, check in on them, take care of them. I believe that is what Facebook is letting us do at a scale that was previously unimaginable. I'm going to wrap up here. Technology is doing some amazing things, more environmentally sound products, giving people born in the right place with the right education opportunities that we've never seen the likes of before. A certain amount of income inequality is a good thing because it's motivating. You can't see this, I took a screenshot I got from Uber just 2 days here to San Francisco, and it said, your driver, Kang, is hearing impaired, please put in your address. I mean, there's some amazing things we're doing with technology. The hard part is, for me, are we in fact, I'm going to skip through some of these things, do we have the greatest concentration of wealth and IQ in history to sell another Nissan, right? We're making incredible progress against the meaningful, but I worry we're not making much progress against the profound. Health, safety, and safe harbor from violence, status, gender equality, income inequality. There's some big problems that if you're on the wrong side of them are a hell of a lot more meaningful than getting to the right place for $5 instead of $8, or having a bigger TV, or having someone serve you the right ad at the right time. The best and brightest used to go to work for NASA. Now they go to work for Twitter. And I'm scared we're getting a little bit screwed up in terms of our priorities and the outcomes. The most exciting thing about technology, I think, is empathy. I think there's a direct correlation between broadband speeds and our likelihood to go to war with each other. China has very low bandwidth. North Korea has no bandwidth. The less we understand about each other, the more likely we are to make stupid, aggressive actions. People with the same economic system do not declare war on each other. As soon as countries get more and more bandwidth, They understand us, we understand them, and I think we are less likely to commit acts of violence against each other. So I think the greatest thing that's happening in technology is an increase in broadband that is infecting the rest of the world. Some great numbers. Abject poverty down 75% in the last 20 years. We thought we were going to cut it in half. We've cut it by 3/4. It's going to be halved again in the next 10 years. If you have a kid right now, or you're expecting, the life expectancy is 100 years, and that child has less likelihood of dying at the hands of another human being than any child in history. Literacy's up, life expectancy's up, and a lot of this is being enabled by technology, so I always like to end on a positive note. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to spend 2 minutes waxing philosophical or sentimental about Cal and my experience since Cal. Graduated from UCLA, or so the story now for UC kids is some exceptional kid that Rich and his team or people from UC find and pull them out. I did not get good grades, but I didn't test well either. I was a unremarkable kid, but the University of California, the UC system in the 80s said, if you graduate from high school with a B average, we'll let you in somewhere. So I got into UC Riverside, and then I got off the wait list at UCLA, and in exchange for that generosity and that belief in me, I rewarded them by graduating from UCLA with a 2.27 GPA. That is a true story. Rich can confirm that. Dan Sullivan reminded me of that just about 45 minutes ago. And then Dan Sullivan and Fran Hill took another chance on me and let me into Haas, which made absolutely no sense. School for me was $6,000 tuition, undergrad and grad. I started Profit with 3 clients, Levi Strauss & Company, the Haas family, Dryers, Rick Kronk, and William Sonoa, Howard Lester were my first 3 clients here. I do something I love. I have economic security because of the generosity of the University of California. So the largest shareholder at L2 is me. The second largest shareholder are my venture capitalists who put $20 million into the company. The third largest shareholder is the University of California. I am so committed to making sure that this good man and his good team continue to do for me, what we can do for everybody else. The stat I love about Cal, and the chancellor did this when he was in New York, I'm not only getting emotional, but I'm literally running out of oxygen, is Cal will graduate, Berkeley will graduate more kids from low-income households this year than the entire Ivy League combined. So it's such a great honor to be here and to see what fantastic stewardship we have of this institution that literally gave me just so much. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks, Doc. Should we let him go, or should we open it up to questions?
Well, how about 2 quick questions?
Okay.
Is that okay? We love having speakers here who have a point of view, and I think we just got one. We are right at the end, so if we have time for 2 questions, you'll have to use the mic because we're recording. We'll have quick answers, and then we'll have to depart. So please, you're the first question, and then if somebody else, and you're the second question back here.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. I couldn't help but think...
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Mubin Kamawala, second-year MBA student.
Hi.
I couldn't help but think that Teddy Roosevelt is probably rolling in his grave right now about the gang of 4 and thinking about these will become monopolies in the industry. So how do we go about, as a government, in making sure that these don't become monopolies and overtake the consumer?
You know, that's such a thoughtful question, and my guess is there's so many more talented people here that can answer that than I can. It's above my pay grade. I always come back to the same place, and that is you've got to give as many people as possible the opportunities to go be disruptors themselves, and it kind of all comes back to education for me. And that is you've got to give as many people as possible a chance to go after their piece of the pie. But I do worry that, I mean, and I can say this in Berkeley, and I say this everywhere, but I'll get more perceptive. I think that there's absolutely no excuse to have a long-term capital gains tax. Why am I being taxed at 20% when I sell shares? For some reason, we've decided that capital is more honorable than sweat, that the money that money makes should be more precious and treated more benign, in a more benign way from a tax status than actual work, which to me is nothing more than a transfer of wealth from the middle class. Who owns assets? 92% of stocks are owned by wealthy people. It's just, why do we have this protected class, which quite frankly, I'm a part of? It just makes no sense to me that we would let people accrete so much wealth and then put this chaser effect on it of lower tax rates. It absolutely is totally backwards to me and not a progressive society and not how we encourage. I mean, we've taken income inequality, and a certain amount is good for it. I love living in a nation where there's some income inequality, where a combination of luck, talent, and hard work can give you a great life. I think that's important. But we've taken it and said, okay, once you're in the winner's ring, if you win the lottery, we're going to triple it, courtesy of taxes from the middle class. I think our tax structure is regressive. I think we talk about programs for the poor people, and we use terms like moral hazard, and then when we talk about cutting taxes for the wealthy, we use terms like growth. We have been sold a bill of goods around not giving people the opportunities, not giving companies a chance to just eke out a good living. In my class, I have no doubt, I have 325 kids, there's a couple billionaires in there. They'll make it through alternative investments. We have a ton of kids who go into hedge funds or tech. But the sad part is, I think 20 or 30 of them are going to end up dependent upon the government or their parents. It's never been easier to be a billionaire, but it's never been harder to be a millionaire. It's never been harder just to do a good job and make a decent living. The media makes us believe that these billionaires are everywhere and that there's people from Uber, Facebook, and Amazon everywhere. There aren't that many of them. There just aren't that many of them. So I think better tax policy, ensuring that as many people as possible have access to education so they can get their piece of the pie. But I worry, and I don't know if I'm getting older and I see everything as half empty now, but I don't think a kid like me can get into a school like this the way I was. I don't think a kid like me can afford to start a business now with the crushing student debt they come out with. And, I've reached light speed. I'm doing really well now, and all of a sudden I find out I'm getting all these tax breaks. I started a business from 2011 to 2016, so the first $10 million in capital gains, tax-free, right? Totally tax-free. That makes no sense at all, right? I'll take advantage of it. I'm not going to disarm unilaterally, but we have a tax structure and an education system in terms of costs that, in my opinion, are creating massive inequality. That was a longer answer than you wanted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Eve.
Hi, this has been a tremendously valuable use of our time. Thank you so much.
Introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Who are you?
My name's Eve Cowan, and I'm a development officer for the Haas School of Business.
I'm sure I'll hear from you.
You mentioned a little bit about the future of higher education and education in general, and of course that's of interest to probably everyone in the room. Can you share a little bit more about that?
So
or as deeply as we have time for?
Everyone's waiting for this environment to be disrupted, right? Because a guy teaching at $163,000 a night can't be sustainable, right? So everyone's saying it's going to be disrupted. Everyone knows it's going to be disrupted. But then the next question is, well, who's going to disrupt it? And right now the conventional wisdom is it's going to be some MOOC, or it's going to be a technology company financed by Kleiner, or General Catalyst, or Sequoia. You know who's going to disrupt education? Harvard or Stanford. The 5 or 10 companies with the best leadership, the best human capital, and the third leg of the stool, the most resources, Harvard could double its incoming class with no sacrifice in quality. They're going to go from 3,000 students, in my view, what I would do if I were Harvard, I'd go to 30,000 students using technology in a multi-channel model. I'd wipe out tuition. Then how do you compete against Harvard? When it's free, and they're using technology to take the 30,000, not the 3,000 best students. So this is what is so important for us as an institution over the next 5 to 10 years. The top 5 or 8 schools will disrupt everybody else. Are we going to be on the right side of that or the wrong side of that? You do not want to be number 20 right now. The top 5, it's happening everywhere. The top 1 or 2 in every industry that have access to cheaper capital, better human talent, and a better momentum are pulling away from everybody else. The same exact thing is going to happen in education. It's going to be, the spoils are going to go to the top 5. So, the speech I give around education is, we're right on the bubble. Like, we're somewhere between, by most standards, between 6 and 8. And the only thing separating us between 6 and 8 and between 5 and 1, it's only one thing. Our professors are right there. Our human capital, the students, second hardest school in the nation to get into, meaning unbelievable human capital. The only difference between us and the top 5 and the people who are going to disrupt is resources. Full stop. So get to it.
Thank you, Scott. Woo! And I'm going to go get to it as well. Thank you for coming.